everyone, my name is Alyson. I'm from the blog sewhealthymom.com, and I'm just a fellow sewing enthusiast like you all. I've been doing it for about 2.5 years, primarily self-taught, so it's been a fun adventure. I'm really excited to be here participating in this Live Fox Snippets, and I hope you all have been enjoying the tutorials so far. I think it's great when we can compare ideas and learn from each other. It's part of the wonderful thing about the sewing community, so I'm proud to be part of it. I'm here to talk to you today about pants fitting, some alterations that you can make to improve the fit of your pants. So hopefully this is helpful, and if there is something I don't cover, please let me know if you have certain questions, because it is hard to cover that broad topic in just a little snippet video. So feel free to ask questions, of course. But I do want to just mention that, of course, it is important to take great measurements ahead of time, accurate measurements, before you even select your size or sizes. So be sure to hold your tape measure parallel with the floor when you're taking your measurements of your waist, which is about 1 inch above your belly button. That's your natural waist. Keep the parallel position of your tape measure when you take that measurement, and also your hips will be the fullest part of your hips, including your booty, and also your upper thigh, so the fullest part, usually around 2 inches below your crotch, just that fullest measurement there, and then as well as your calf. That's another important one to take into consideration. And so that way you can compare your own measurements to the measurements you find on the pattern pieces, and just make sure that those are going to work together, and if not, you know where you need to make alterations. Vertical measurements, one important one is your crotch length. So you want to go, well, what you read will tell you that you want to go from your natural waist height down through your legs and up the backside to that same level. That will be your total crotch length. If you're like me and you wear your pants lower, I tend to go about 3 inches below my belly button from that point up through my legs and up to the back at that point too. So a little bit lower. That's just realistically where I wear my pants, and I don't like to factor in the waistband at that point just because you have to account for the seam allowances. So I just will measure where I think the pants pattern pieces will hit, and that way I can compare directly to the pattern. So, and then lengthwise for your inseam, you want to make sure you take that into account, so your crotch point all the way down to where you want your pants to fall once they're hemmed. So for me, that's the crotch to the top of my foot, and just compare that to the pattern. And also you can compare crotch to knee and knee to ankle on your body versus the pattern, and make sure that that knee point on the pattern, which would be the narrowest point on the leg, should coincide with yours. And if it doesn't, you can slash the pattern and spread it to lengthen, or you can slash it and overlap if you have shorter legs and your knee point is actually higher than on the pattern. So make sure that you get them to coincide well, and that will improve your fit as well. So important or handy tools to have would be, of course, a regular ruler, a curved ruler for any grading or pattern piece alterations that you're doing, a seam gauge, and I'll show you how to use that, a rotary cutter, and flexible ruler. Now, if you've seen the video that I linked to, it's a really good one from 5 out of 4, showing the flexible ruler technique for finding your own crotch impression, your crotch curve, and tracing that onto paper so that you have your individualized crotch curve here that you can compare to your flat pattern pieces, and just see what variations there are, and then you can account for those and actually make the changes on your pattern pieces. But be sure when you do that, label the front and back. Oh, don't mind my beagle. Front and back, and then the center crotch point, because you'll want to line those up to your pattern pieces later. And then, so I will show you lots of examples on the paper of what alterations we can do there. I like to make some changes ahead of time before I sew my muslin, so that hopefully my muslin will fit better, and I'll make fewer changes later. That's the goal. But then there are some further alterations you will make based on your muslin fitting. So be sure to select muslin fabric that is similar in stretch and weight to your final garment fabric, because that will be an important factor in fitting. So be sure you're following the stretch guidelines spelled out in your pattern, and you're selecting muslin fabric that is similar to what is required and what is going to be your final fabric. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can change the camera angle and just show you some things that I do on paper. So I've got a pretend front and back pattern piece here, and I hope that you can see that it's pretty bright in here right now. So a little tricky to see it, but hopefully. Okay, so what I've done is I've already done some alterations, but I'll explain what I do normally. Okay, so first of all, it starts with taking measurements. So find out what your seam allowance is for your pattern, and that way you know that you want to take those out or account for those before you start measuring the crotch curves. So I deduct the seam allowance from the top because that's where the waistband will attach. So let's pretend it's 3/8 of an inch in this case. So I came down 3/8 of an inch and made a little mark. And then I went in from the edge 3/8 of an inch all the way along the curve. And I stopped, when I got to the crotch point, I stopped 3/8 of an inch before I hit that edge. That way you're identifying your stitching line right here, and that's what you're measuring. So I like to use my plastic ruler that's flexible and just measure along that curve of the stitching line, and then I just make a note of that on my pattern piece, how long that is, as well as my own rise that I've measured separately. Then I can compare the two. I do the same for the back pattern piece. I do them separately, just because I may need to change the front rise by a different amount than the back rise. It just depends on the pattern. In most cases, for me personally, I usually need to shorten the front rise. I have a long torso, but I think my pelvis tilts forward quite a bit, so that effectively shortens my front rise. So what I need to do is, if I'm just changing the front rise in this case, then I will slash through the pattern, but only up to that side seam and not through it. And then I'll actually put a piece of tape here as a reminder that that's my hinge. And then I'll go just beyond that and make a slash off the edge there. And then I'll be left with just this hinge that's attached. And I can, in this case, overlap the front and back, or the front piece, the top piece, overlap it with the other. And I'm taking out some length from the curve that way. So let's just say I'm overlapping by about a 1/2 inch. And then I'll take that in place so it stays where it should be. And now my curve is the dark line here. My curve is not smooth anymore, so I will use my curved ruler to true that up, just following along with the original curve that was in place, and just trace a curve so now it's smoothed out. Now, by having this hinge here, I didn't change the side seam length at all. So that's important to note. If you are changing both front and back by the same amount, then you can actually slash all the way through the pattern piece on that length and shorten line. And you can spread them apart or overlap them by the same amount on both. And you are changing the side seam length in that case, but you're changing it by the same amount, so that's okay. But that is only in the case of changing the front and back rise by the same amount. I feel like that's pretty rare that happens. So, but if it does, that's the way you can do it. If it's not by the same amount, then you can use your hinge approach to separate, to lengthen, or overlap, to shorten. Okay, so when would you shorten the rise? What would you see on the muslin that would make you think you needed to shorten the rise? In this case, this is my pair of ready-to-wear pants, actually. I'm going to pretend is my muslin. I actually do tend to get horizontal folds here at the front crotch, indicating that it's too long there in the front. And my crotch point ends up being too low, and it's very annoying and uncomfortable. So what I did was I pinned up the excess fabric. You want to pull upward when you pinch out excess, rather than pulling downward on the waistband. It just will improve your fit that way. So you want to pinch upward the excess fabric. And let's say, actually in this example, let's say that it was an inch total that I pinched, but 1/2 inch on the front and 1/2 inch on the back, so that equals 1 inch. That's how much I would take out of my front rise. So I would actually overlap by 1 inch to take out that full inch. That way I'm shortening that front crotch curve, and I should get rid of the wrinkles that way. Now, when would you want to lengthen the front crotch curve or the back? That is if you have stress lines. So let's say in the front example, if you had smiling wrinkles, as it's called, diagonally pointing upward, that means that there's strain on the crotch. It's straining because there's not enough length there for it. So that's when you would lengthen out the crotch on the front. If you're having wrinkles underneath your bottom, I have that issue. So let's say you're wearing the pants, the muslin, and you're seeing wrinkles right underneath your bottom. That is an indicator that you have a low butt. So thanks, gravity. But what you'll do in that case is scoop out the back crotch curve. So what we'll do here, and this is something you can do when you're comparing your crotch curve that you traced to your pattern initially anyway, but it's the same approach. You'll line up the crotch points. This is just like she did in the video, the 5 out of 4 video for the crotch curve method. You will attach front and back at the crotch, but you'll overlap by the seam allowance amount, so by 3/8 of an inch, and then tape it in place. You want those crotch points to be flush there. And if you need more room to be scooped out of the back, then you would just use your curved ruler and scoop out your extra room that you need. So it kind of creates a sling for your bottom if you think about it. You're deepening that curve so your bottom has somewhere to rest instead of just drooping downward. So just true it back up with your original line here so that it's not a sharp curve that you're making. But just give yourself some extra room, and then if needed, add some here to the outseam to give yourself extra fabric that you took away from here. So whenever you take something away on one side, you want to add it to the other, essentially. But basically, also, if you are pinning, let's say you have excess fabric along the length of your leg on your muslin. So when you're pinning, you don't want to just pin on one side. So for example, you don't want to just pin on the inseam only. You want to pin equally on the inseam and the side seam. So that way you won't get twisted seams when you go to sew it again. So be sure to make it equal changes on both sides. So if you need to pin out an extra inch of fabric, you want to do a 1/2 inch here and a 1/2 inch here. That way it's even and you don't get twisted side seams, because that's uncomfortable as well. Another biggie is the sway back issue. Since women's pelvises tend to tilt forward, some more than others, you will get excess fabric sticking out from the back waistband. The waistband will stick out from your back. I have that issue a lot. It's really something that needs to be addressed. So you'll put on your muslin pants and make sure that you attach the waistband. You can just baste it on. And then if you have this center back sticking out from your body, then you want to pinch out that wedge of extra fabric. Just pin it out and then take it to your sewing machine and just baste it through the waistband and down into your pants. And then try them on again, and hopefully they'll be snug to your body at that point. And then you can make that change to your pattern piece. Let's bring the back piece over. And you'll just draw in that wedge at the center back. You'll just dash it in. Say I pinned out 1.5 inches from that top edge, then I would make 1.5 inches distance here, and then tapering down to 0 at the outseam. So it's truly a triangular wedge there that I'm taking out. And then also take that amount out from your waistband, especially if once you put on the waistband it's still having that issue. So take some extra out of the waistband as well. And a good place to do that is the center front, where if it's cut on a fold, so if this is my waistband piece, but it's cut on the fold, then I will actually fold my paper piece. I'll just fold it back by that amount that I want to take out. And then my waistband will effectively be shortened. Okay, so that is something you can do to take care of the sway back issue. And then here's the back pattern piece. And I know it's very bright in here, I'm sorry. Maybe bring it closer. So pretend this is the back pattern piece, and that's your knee point. If it's still tight there, or if you're getting wrinkles, that means there's just not enough room width-wise for the back of your knee there. So a quick way to do it is just add extra room, just gradually tapering out from the back of your knee downward all the way down to the hem. Same on both sides, so it's equal. And that will just give you more room, more space for your knee. So that should take care of those wrinkles back there. Okay, so other than taking your circumference measurements and your vertical measurements, comparing those to the pattern, and then making those preliminary adjustments, trying on your muslin, identifying extra fabric wherever it may be, or stress lines where you need more room, that's essentially the basis of altering pants patterns. There are a lot more specific examples that I will cover on my blog, actually. So I'll be doing a series of fitting posts related to pants, and even moving on to shirts, because I have some issues in the shoulder and bust area that I've been trying to address recently, and I thought others might be interested too. So just follow along with my blog if this is something you're interested in, and definitely see those links that I posted in my post on the Facebook group, because those are very important. They give you good starting points for making alterations to your pants so they can fit better, because that is the goal. So feel free to leave comments, ask questions, and other than that, I really appreciate you watching, and happy sewing.